Hey everybody, my name's Steve.
And I'm Ryan.
And Ryan, what a time to start a podcast.
Indeed, what a time to be alive and playing Keyforge.
Some might say it's a time of triumph.
It very well could be that time. Let me check my watch here. Yeah, it looks like it's triumph o'clock.
And you know what? We're just gonna keep going with the Keyforge puns. Now I'm just kidding.
If it weren't
yeah,
if it weren't for bad jokes, you'd never appreciate the good jokes.
that's a good point. So this is the Keychains podcast, where honestly, we're here to talk about kind of just the parts of this game we like a lot or love. I don't know.
Like, love, and hate. I think we could cover all three.
I don't know. I can't really think of a thing I hate very much.
Well, I just want to reserve the right to complain about things we hate in case they pop up.
It wouldn't be a card game made by Richard Garfield if there wasn't just a tiny bit of hate somewhere just reserved hate that someone eventually will bring up.
Exactly. At least there's no ante.
That's a good point. Actually, that's part of the. I don't know if you read it in the Time of Triumph article. That's part of it now. You have to actually ante your entire deck.
Totally. So, in case people are wondering, the Time of Triumph that we are referring to is an announcement by Fantasy Flight Games about their future intentions with the organized play system. You can read the article yourself. We're not going to go into depth of it. It's on the fantasyflightgames.com website for Keyforge. They talk about a bunch of different kits and everything else. So we'll go over a little bit of this. I'm sure other better podcasts are probably going into it in depth, but we'll kind of go through some highlights and maybe talk about like some of the little tidbits that we picked out of it, things that we were excited about. So with that in mind, what were what are some of the takeaways you took from the announcement?
I mean, I think it's kind of cool. Not that that seems so non-committal, but it's cool. It's cool in the sense that it's just like they're going to reward people for just playing.
Oh, are you talking about the seasonal kits for open play nights?
I think really just everything. Like it kind of encompasses a lot of the stuff that I feel like I miss from other card games. I mean, it's not like Keyforge doesn't do this already with you're pretty much putting up for like a sealed event, playing Archon tournaments. That sounds like a lot of fun. That seems like the thing that like your closest comparison to like Magic right now, right? Is like you're gonna go and you're gonna play in a tournament, you're gonna win a thing at the end with the deck that you made. Although I guess that doesn't get really run locally a whole lot, but you would probably know more than I would on that side of things. Or like you go in a sealed or draft event and you're gonna just win small stuff. Wizards isn't putting out like kits for these stores to kind of set up as the prize at the end. Usually the prize at the end is just
right.
Cards,
well, and
right?
in addition to that, one of the things that's kind of interesting about the approach that FFG is taking with this, the fact that they're even doing a seasonal kit to support open play nights is really, I mean, granted, my only experience is with Magic events, really. I don't really play any other card games, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, or anything like that. I played Naruto once upon a time. But the organized play, there wasn't really a sit down, show up, just kind of play, whoever else shows up, do whatever you want, and still get something. Like that's kind of a foreign concept, in my experience, amongst other card games. I don't want to just assume blanketly that there's no other card game ever that's done anything like that. But it's kind of cool that just showing up and playing will now reward you, even in a small way. Just the fact that you get something is really interesting.
It reminds me a lot of when we were playing a lot of miniatures games together, specifically like War Machine, where like the store would get like a kit for an event that the company was running at the time, and you'd show up and you you could just win out prizes for just participation. It does sound weird that there's this whole like everybody gets a trophy kind of thing, but at the same time, like I really do like the idea that you're not going to walk away empty-handed just for coming in and playing the game. Like they're actively rewarding you for coming and doing the thing that you want to do.
And a big difference between participation trophy and like the seasonal kit for open play nights is you can put the trophy. I don't know. You can use the trophy to track your key count or ember count. I mean, like it's a much different. There's a big difference between a participation trophy and something actually tangibly useful in the game, and that's a big difference between just everyone getting a trophy and getting something useful for going. And it's a great marketing tool for stores to be able to drive play.
Yeah.
People never played before. Okay, we'll show up. You get a deck, and now you get a cool free thing just for sitting here and playing a little bit, and maybe come to our tournament next time.
Yeah, and I think that that's also true too. Is just like when it comes to a tournament too, you're gonna get something for just coming and playing, and you might win something at the end, like something bigger, but you're gonna get amber shards. For those of you who are still kind of new to the game and you haven't been register your decks. I would say first off, go register your decks. Um, which you can do from the KeyForge app
Mm-hmm.
on iOS or the Google Play Store. But you're gonna get amber shards for just playing the game as like going
Well,
to
and so
events.
what Steve's referring to with the Amber Shards is the when you register a deck in the app itself, it will show you your Amber Shards, and the app is linked to the Fantasy Flight Games website. You have an account there that you have to set up, and you can always log in on a website. It's not just app only.
Yeah, that's true.
Anyway, it tracks your Amber Shard count, which is kind of a currency for playing the game, and you can those shards will like upgrade themselves into keys, kind of paralleling the in-game mechanics. And this currency, when you go to like a convention or a big tournament or a regional area, something like that, they'll have a prize wall. I mean, no one knows what's going to be in the prize wall, but probably cool, neat things: play mats, sleeves, deck boxes, that sort of thing, tokens, and you'll be able to redeem your shards and keys for those things, which is really cool because it means just literally by buying decks and opening packs, you can get free stuff when you go. And then participating in open play nights, going to tournaments, doing any of this stuff, win, lose, or draw, you're going to be rewarded with cool, neat little extras.
Yeah, so that all starts on the 22nd of this
Yeah.
month, actually. So we'll probably have more to
Uh,
say coming than the next episode. Mostly because like we've kind of read this over and we have a good idea of like what's going on and what it's going to be like. So that I'm excited for it. This game has roped me in hook, line, and sinker. So I'm interested in kind of getting into that competitive scene a
Now,
bit.
no, sorry. The
No, you're good.
this information is also on the Crucible Cast. Is that their official podcast?
Yeah, so I think
Okay.
that's like that's I guess the best way you could put it is their marketing podcast for this. I don't think they actually like feed it out to any sort of like RSS feeds,
Okay.
but they do. I believe it's just like a YouTube only thing that they end up pushing out to like their main pages and things like that. But yeah, like I watched it when they released it, and it was that was when they kind of hinted a lot about the chainbound stuff, which is something we'll probably talk about at a later date because it's a lot in a way, and I want to be able to get that right when we talk about it. So, but yeah, that's their kind of like delivery method of news outside of like these articles that they're putting out. This is like their more personalized touch where they're explaining it without the kind of the in world flair that they're kind of throwing in with like these articles. Um, it's more just like kind of blunt, sit down and we'll talk about it kind of thing. Not blunt's a bad word, but you know what I mean. Personalized touch. There we go.
Right. Makes sense.
Yeah. So I think I wanted to talk to you, or not talk to you specifically, although I don't know.
But there's no one else
Uh,
here, so you don't have a lot of options.
well, we have the audience; they're listening.
Well, I don't think they're going to
Uh,
respond.
that they might. Uh, just late in a
It'll just
later
be
date.
it'll be a very delayed response. Yeah, sure, sure.
So I want to talk about our favorite houses in kind of I want to talk about our favorite houses and our least favorite houses, and maybe just some things about the game that we've been enjoying in general. I know like this is not your thing, but man, do I love the simple fact that I don't have to spend like more hours building a deck than actually playing it.
Well, I don't. Well, it's not that I don't like the lack of construction. It's not like I take a mark against the game for the fact that I can't construct a deck. Although I will say that I would like somehow some sort of constructing type of thing. I actually do appreciate that I don't have to spend extra time fiddling and tweaking and tuning with my decks. My deck is just my deck, and the time expenditure is mostly just getting good with that particular deck or learn, just familiarizing myself with the game in general and getting better with strategy and everything else. I I kind of miss a little bit of that personalization, that personal touch that you can get by tweaking a deck, tuning it, finding out which card is better than the other card. But I don't need that with Keyforge because I have that with Magic. So Keyforge as it is, as long as I'm still playing Magic, I don't need that fix, that element. I don't need that with Keyforge. I appreciate Keyforge just the way it is with that, with that in mind.
Yeah, I've found that I've just spent I guess the thing I can preface this with is that I have 10 decks. Uh, I know that there are some people out there who have a significant number of decks. I know a couple of them, but I have 10 decks, and actually there's a couple that I haven't even taken out of the wrapper yet. I have played a couple of them in the Crucible, which has been pretty fun, but I've spent more time playing decks that I just want to learn. So I found like there's like a lot of things, especially in like constructed Magic, where you're sitting there and you're like, all right, I built this deck and this is my theory on how this deck is going to go, and then you end up spending the rest of the time learning that deck and then going, oh, this doesn't actually work out the way I wanted it to, or this works out way better than I wanted it to, and then you're kind of like, that's where that ground like grind time comes in. I've just found that I've been just grinding, like I just get right to the grinding out what I need to do with this deck. And I was actually listening to somebody who was streaming the game today, uh, and she had mentioned how she's been finding that just grinding out decks has proved things untrue to her, where she was like, oh, I went on a 4 game loss with this deck, and then I eventually came out and it's like now it's like one of my most winning decks. It's like, okay, like there is certainly a amount of time spent in learning a deck that can actually turn that like deck's power level around for you, because I
Definitely.
have a couple that I think are just garbage, and then as I started playing with them, I was like, actually now I'm seeing where the pieces start to fit together and how I can manipulate my turn to win
Right. And
effectively.
I completely understand. It's as you get familiar with any given deck, you're going to know your outs. You're going to know what's coming up. If they've got like a big present board state, you'll be like, well, do I want to swing in and take out their Witch of the Eye, or do I want to hold back because I know that I have a lot of removal in this deck and I haven't seen a lot of it yet, which means I'm due to draw into some removal soon. And with that in mind, that means I'm going to need to choose house X this turn because if I get that removal, it'll be in house Y. So I want to make sure I do this thing in that order. And all of that is going to come from familiarity with the deck, knowing your way through it. Because you're not going to be you're not going to be sitting there with your Archon card. Like, what cards have I drawn? Oh, that's right. Okay, so that means I have these ones, and this one's like you probably, I don't know if they have a judge equivalent yet, but they'd probably get you called on some sort of slow play for
Yeah, they do.
evaluating.
That does exist,
Oh,
but
what are they? Oh,
yeah,
marshals, is that it?
yeah, the marshals. Yeah.
I'm awesome at
So
remembering
yeah,
small
so
little things.
so having kind of said that, it turns out my favorite deck is actually like has two of the houses that I enjoy the most in it, and the name of the deck is He Who Manufactures Spirits, which is a really weird deck name. Not the weirdest deck name that I even own, but it's
So
neat.
wait, let's go over that name for a minute because now I'm looking over. He who manufactures spirits, so he makes spirits. So it's someone that makes spirits. So he kills people. Whoever this nebulous he is, he
It's
makes
the most
spirits by
overt
killing
serial
people.
killer
That's how
name
I'm
ever.
taking this name, which is pretty great. Yeah, he's a spirit manufacturer. I don't think he's pulling them out of thin air. I think he's just removing the body element. So that's pretty great.
I mean, it's not wrong. Looking at like the three houses in the deck are Dis, Mars, and
Yeah,
Untamed, and so some key cards in the deck are key to Dis, which is an artifact that you play. It has Omni, which means that you can play it during any house phase. It doesn't require you to be in Dis to use it. And it's sacrifice key to Dis, destroy each creature. So,
that's
so
pretty
that
sweet.
becomes fun. Then I have the Master of Two. I have the Master of Two in it, which is he is a 4 power creature, demon. Not that I haven't seen types matter a ton in the game yet, but I'm sure, or traits is what they're called. but I'm sure it'll
There
become a
is
thing later on. I know a
okay,
lot
yeah.
of Mars and Sanctum cares, but I haven't seen a ton of it outside of those two houses. But I could be wrong. Haven't seen every card in this game yet because I've only mostly browsed through a lot of them. But so Master of Two's ability is Reap. You may destroy a creature with power 2. So yeah, so it's that side's pretty murdery, and then the Mars side is actually where most of my creatures are actually coming from in this deck. But it's got 2 Mega Mouths in it, which are I can't ever pronounce his first name, so I'm not going to. He's a 3 power creature. Whereas a Fight Reap, you may use a non-Mars creature.
Oh,
Um,
I can't think of the name, but I know what you're
and
talking
then
about. I can't think
my
of the name either, but I know what you're talking about.
yeah, it's like Yolquix or
I think
Yolwix.
you get a
I don't know.
pass if you can't pronounce Mars
Uh,
cards. That's fine. I think it's like trying to
that's fair.
pronounce things out of Cthulhu without any sort of external frame of reference. You get a pass when you get it wrong. Yeah.
Fair. I actually like this deck because actually more because of the untamed
Yeah.
side of things. And actually I want to save a lot of the things that I'm going to bring up about the untamed side for a second
Now,
here.
Steve, you mentioned that in this deck, two of the three houses were some of your favorites, and you said it was Dis, Untamed, and Mars were the houses in there. Which is out of those three? Which were the two that were your favorites?
So it's definitely Dis and Untamed. Dis is just rude. But not, and that's not necessarily why I like them. And there are some neat things that come with Dis. But the thing is every time I play this game, I find that board state matters a lot. And so being able to control that board state without having to put too many of my own things at risk in doing so is a lot of fun. The like Brobnar, for instance, is like kind of the opposite, where they have this ability to control the board through fighting, but I often end up taking a lot of damage for doing it. Where Dis is like this creature comes into play, bounce your opponent's creature to your hand, or bounce a creature to your hand, or to its owner's hand, things like that. So Dis ends up being a lot of fun, but at the same time, it's like very risky, which is another thing I like. Like again, like that key to Dis, like that puts everything of my own in
Right.
at risk as well. But at a certain time, at a certain point,
And
that's gonna
especially if you can
matter.
get ahead of your
No,
opponent, or I mean, sorry, if your opponent is ahead of you, it's a pretty good catch-up mechanic because that's gonna wreak havoc with any plan that they had. Well, I suppose they get a turn because
yeah,
you'll play the key exhausted. They get a turn to adjust their plan, and then you'll come back and be able to use the key to dis.
yep. And it's a great threat in effect. You just keep it on the board and be like, hey, don't commit too much because I'm gonna blow it
Right.
all up at
And an
some point.
interesting strategic component to key to dis. I mean, you said that it's a deterrent, but I find that whenever someone has a way to do mass destruction and it's telegraphed by being, like in this case, an artifact sitting on the table, it's almost better to force them to use it by playing hard into it. I mean, to a point, you don't just like dump your entire hand and be like, okay, now blow everything up, cool. But you want to force them to use it on your terms by playing threatening important things, but not all of them, not too many. That way they use the key and they think, haha, I got all your stuff. And then you're like, yeah, you got what I was okay with you getting. Now I'm going to play this and play this and play this and play this. And you no longer have a key to threaten me with. Which makes it that back and forth is very
Right.
interesting because you play the key to dis and you might be aware that your opponent might be doing that, but then again, they might not have enough material in their hand to hold back, and they might be bluffing a sense of I'm pretending to put threatening things out to pop the key, and then as the key player you're thinking, do I are they slow playing, are they sandbagging cards in their hand, do I use the key now, do I try to wait for a little more value? And it's this very interesting back and forth psychological game as far as when to use that key for the most value.
Yeah, and it ends up being kind of this kind of lost my train of thought there. So we're gonna actually just
Okay.
move on. So I guess some like interesting cards in Dis. Like I know we brought up Key to Dis, but I really like that's not like necessarily the cards that I actually find super interesting in the house. I think cards the first card that comes to mind for me is Control the Weak. So Control the Weak is an action card. It gives you an amber when you play it. And then it has play. Choose a house on your opponent's identity card. Your opponent must choose that house as their active house on their next turn. So that becomes like very, very interesting interactions in like, what do I know that person has in hand? Like if they're playing a bunch of Mars cards and they're archiving, or they're using a bunch of Mars cards to like archive some stuff, and or they got logos and they're doing things like that, can I completely disrupt a turn by knowing like they're gonna play logos next turn, or they're gonna play Untamed next turn, and maybe they got a key charge that's sitting in that archive pile or in their hand, and I'm gonna be like, oh no, I'm choosing Sanctum this turn, and you have to play Sanctum. And the ability to like kind of force my opponent into like, it comes back to that idea is like it's always better to force your opponent into two
Mm.
bad decisions and don't ever give them a good decision. So when you, I mean, control the weak again, totally high risk. It can completely blow up in your face when you're like, they don't have a ton of shadows cards on the table. I'm, uh, I'm at 7 amber, and then I say you have to play shadows, and they go great miasma, and then I now can't forge a key on my next turn because they miasmed me. Uh, so like it's like one of those fun cards for me that like makes the game it brings that kind of poker, like that poker
Sure.
mentality to the game,
I
which
think
I think is
that
fun.
I mean, you mentioned high risk stuff. The key to dis and control the weak specifically are very important, powerful cards that reward you for either knowing your opponent's deck or at least being able to pick up on what their deck might be trying to do. I mean, key to dis, if you know your opponent's deck well, which obviously you have access to their Archon card. Is it Archon or Archon? Okay.
I think it's Archon.
You have access to their Archon card, so you can give it a quick glance. But having game knowledge, being able to leverage game knowledge and just name recognition off those cards, because you obviously can't look up every single card on someone's Archon card before the game starts.
Sure, you're specifically
That too.
not supposed to.
But being able to recognize, oh yeah, I know what these cards are. I can kind of parse what this deck is trying to do. I kind of get an idea of what's going on, so that you use your key to dis most effectively, or seeing, being looking through the card names and saying, oh, okay, so their Untamed is really weak. So if I get a chance to play Control the Weak, depending on their board state, depending on what's in their discard pile, depending on what I've seen come around in the game, Untamed is a pretty good target because even if they have a hand full of Untamed, it's a pretty weak house for their deck. So this seems like that very interesting, rewarding you for your knowledge card type of thing. I mean, maybe not the entire faction, but it definitely seems like a control element.
Yeah, yeah, agreed. So the other card that I find really interesting in Dis is Snudge. So what Snudge is a he is a 4 power creature. He has fight, reap, return an artifact or flank creature to its owner's hand. Couple of things that I love about this card. First off, if you go look through the entire game set, artifact removal is really hard to come by. I can think of off the top of my head that have artifact removal. There's a lot of artifact taxing, which is super cool. I actually think that's a really awesome mechanic where I mean, it's control in a sense, where you got to pay me 1 amber to use your artifacts, and there's a bunch of cards that do that. There's actually even one in Dis itself. But the ability to just bounce that kind of scary thing before they have the chance to crack it, because there's no ability to react to things in real time within this game. So if I drop a Snudge, I'm able to somehow ready him in that same turn. I can bounce that key to Dis back, or I can bounce. What's the Shadows card? I'm trying to think of it at the top of my head. Subtle Maul, bouncing that Subtle Maul back to their hand, so they can't make me discard a card on their turn. Are really cool things like that. And if I can't ready Snudge, and there's something on that table that you know has a sacrifice outlet like key to dis or anything like that, they're forced to use that before I get Snudge out, or before I can actually use Snudge, because then I set them back a turn. So I like Snudge a lot. I think he's probably one of my favorite creatures
Yeah,
in the
Snudge seems
house.
very cool. And Disc just seems like a cool house in general. Their art is really neat.
Yeah, I mean, this game has pretty consistent art throughout the entire. the entire set, but you can definitely like. There's a couple times where I look and be like, oh, that is a completely different artist, and I'm not saying that that seems like an insult in a kind of way, but like it's just good that they had a bunch of artists who could effectively mimic each other throughout the entire set of cards and make everything look nice and cohesive. So that's pretty awesome. So my other favorite house is Untamed, and it's mostly just because the creatures are just so interesting, and like it does the other thing too, where I can just pump out raw Ember as I need to, and cheat keys into play, which I mean, how many times has someone like key charged you
Mm,
on that last turn and just been like, oh, I won because you couldn't stop me from actually doing this one thing. It may feel bad for my opponent, but man, it feels so good. Specifically, someone miasming you and then key charging like the next turn. It's so great. Um, so I guess we talked enough about key charge that I should actually bring up
sure.
what key charge does. Um, so key charge is an action that when you play it, you lose one amber and then you forge a key at the current cost, which is cool because it is a scaling. It's actually a scaling cost, um, in the sense of like it's always at current cost. So and all you'll only ever lose one. So if you have a Titan mechanic out there who reduces your amber like cost by one, or reduces everybody's amber cost by one, or if your opponent has a Murmuk out there that increases your the opponent's keys by one, it's always going to be that cost. If you look at some of the other key cheating cards, they usually have an incredibly high cost that is reduced by some board state thing. But this is just like you lose an amber. If you have enough to forge a key after losing that one amber, you got it. There's your key. Um, so I think that card's really really interesting, but it's certainly not the most interesting card to me, specifically because of the fact that it's just kind of like a here I win button most of the time, or here now I win more card, and that's and I mean and that's fine. Like it's a good card. It's just not interesting to me. And so that's what I when we were talking about this and I was picking out my cards, like I was just like, what are the most interesting cards
That's
to
fair.
me? So with having said that, uh, Perilous Wild is one of my. It is a card that I recently discovered through a deck that I had got, and uh, it is only interesting to me because it is one of the few things that interact with elusive creatures outside of skirmish.
What does it do?
Or not yeah, skirmish. Not skirmish. What is that? Oh, the Niffle is what I'm thinking of. So Perilous Wild is it's an action. When you play it, you destroy each creature with the elusive keyword.
That's pretty crazy.
Which elusive is when you attack a creature for the first time, it deals no damage and it takes no damage. So
And the
if you have a card that you have a really big beefy creature who's going to kill like an elusive creature, which you find a lot of elusive in shadows, um, you have to commit two creatures to killing it every time. So this is a board wipe that only board wipes
it's important
elusive
to note.
creatures, which I love.
It's important to note that the elusive keyword, for those who might not know, only is excuse me. It's important to note that the elusive keyword is only relevant for fighting. So if you have a card that just straight up deals damage, that's not blocked by elusive. Just the fighting,
Right,
which
right. So that's what makes this card super interesting compared to like other board wipes
right,
that you could possibly have. I mean, like key to dis, as we mentioned before, it's going to blow up everything on the table, so that's your stuff as well. And like you may have elusive
right. This
creatures on the
does affect
table,
yours.
so you're still running that chance, yeah. But a lot of other board wipes are like deal X damage to all creatures. And playing those, that's again, it's going to hit your things. You're going to put your own stuff at risk. So like the thing that I like about this is it deals with a problem that you may not have on your side, right? So you can be like, oh well, you have a bunch of urchins out. Here's my perilous wilds. They all die, and now I can reap with my creatures because the board state is a little more in favor for me. Um, and you're not going to be able to get like free reaps off these creatures. Um, I guess we've talked a lot about reaping and maybe not the mechanic what it does itself. So when you reap a creature, so creatures have two actions that they can do a turn. One is fight, which you tap it, and I'm going to use. I should not say tap it. You exhaust it, which is turning the card sideways. You target a creature on your opponent's side, and they deal their damage to each other. Where reaping is when you exhaust the creature, you gain an amber, and a lot of things have triggers based off of reaping or fighting that give little kind of modifications to what's about to happen. So that's why I it's a cool thing because like giving people free reaps because you didn't like they're not going to commit like weaker things to fighting. They're just going to reap with those little guys. So getting rid of them is a big bonus. And a lot of elusive stuff has low power, but you have to commit so much to getting rid of it. It's like, Perilous Wild,
Yeah,
A-okay in my book.
definitely. It's a very, very strong card for some very
Um,
obnoxious, difficult to remove creatures.
yeah, I mean, Shadows is one of the, based on what I can tell on the internet, Shadows is one of the most popular houses in
Absolutely.
the game. So it's not a bad card to have in a deck. The other card for the other card for Untamed that I really, really like is Dew Fairy. And I mean, it's kind of boring, but it's fun for the kind of high risk, high reward style play that I like to do. So it's a 2-power creature. It has elusive. So if I were to Perilous Wild while I had a Dew Fairy out, that'd be very, very bad. But it has an ability that is Reap gain 1 amber. So when you reap with it, you gain your amber as normal, and then the reap trigger happens, which gives you another amber. So it's a nice way to kind of race out that amber. It's not as fast as you would say Dust Pixie, which is another 1-power creature that when it comes into play, it just gives you 2 amber. So if you can protect the Dew Fairy, say if you were playing Shadows, and you had some things that could redirect damage to other creatures, you could keep this Dew Fairy on the table and just reap forever and get 2 every time. I mean, you get a deck with 3 of these, which I've not seen that yet, but I do have a deck with 2. Uh, you can pump out a key every turn as long as you can keep them alive, which rarely happens. But again, it's one of those like fun kind of. I know this is gonna blow up as soon as it hits the table, but if I can get that one turn with it, I'm good.
Well, it's kind of a must answer card, and it's annoying to answer it because it's a 2, so it's not negligible damage if you use one of your creatures to fight it. But you can't go after something that's maybe more threatening or a juicier target like a Witch of the Hunt. Or is it Witch of the Hunt or Witch of the Eye?
Both are pretty scary. I mean, the running joke is if it has
Yeah, that's
witch in
fair.
the name, get rid of it.
So I mean, you want to get rid of a witch, but at the same time, these guys are just going to continually generate value if you don't get rid of them. And like I said, it's got 2 powers, so it's not like it's if you're hitting it with your Niffle to trying to get past it, that's not even taking into account the fact that it has elusive. So you hit it with 2 things. Assuming you don't have a way to bypass the elusive, you're hitting it with 2 different creatures, which means it's dealing 4 damage back out before you can take it out. So
So it won't deal damage out because elusive
no
negates all
damage is
damage. So
dealt.
think of
Oh,
elusive
okay. I didn't
in
realize that. So neither
yes,
creature deals damage. Okay, because that would be, now that I'm thinking about it, man, it
right.
blocks the first hit, but then still deals its damage back. That would be kind of busted. Okay, but okay, so still,
There is a card. There is a card that does it. I think
sure,
I'd have to go look it up at some point, but I think there is a card that does ignore the first amount of damage. Oh, you know what? I'm
that's
confusing it
fine.
with
Yeah.
Shadow Self.
So
So
this is still a
yeah.
really strong card because it's a must remove. It's going to take 2 hits, and it's still going to deal it's going to deal 2 damage back. And you just can't, you just, can't, ignore it, and it just feels bad. It feels bad, man. It's a good
It
card.
does.
It's one
Feels
of
really
those.
bad.
It's
So
in kind of a. I feel like it's going to be an underappreciated workhorse in a lot of decks. Like it's not flashy. It's not strong. It's not a rare. I mean, what is it? A common? Yeah. So I mean,
it's a common.
it's not flashy. It's not powerful. It's not it's a common, but it's going to do work. You get even just one of these on the board, and you're vastly supplementing your Ember output. It's just cards like that are really I think underappreciated.
Yeah, I agree. It's, I mean, the Dust Pixie is one of those cards where it's like when the Dust Pixie hits the table, it's already hit the table. It's done the
Yeah,
work that it needs to do. Generally, a lot of people will remove it because they're like, well, if I let it live on the table for one more turn and you reap with it, now you've gotten
yeah,
3 amber out of that card. So people generally just answer Dust Pixie because it's like, well, I don't want to give you the free amber. But like this is like a little trickier to pull off, and it ends up feeling real good when you get like 2 or 3 turns out of it, and you're like, yeah, I can guarantee myself a key pretty quickly. With all the other cards that I'm
yep,
going to support it with, I can guarantee myself a
yeah.
key really, really quickly. If you're a real jerk and you can house cheat it, that's
Oh
even
man,
more
that's
fun.
just mean.
So how about you, Ryan? So what are some of your favorite things in
Well,
this game so far?
so interestingly enough, the Dew Fairy, it being like an underappreciated, non-flashy workhorse, really is a great way to describe my favorite deck. It is Richard the Scaled, and I don't want to like it. Like, it's got nothing impressive in it, not really. It's got no like crazy powerful, amazing cards. If I tried to sell it online, it'd probably just be $10, but it just it puts in work. It's got some like fantastic cards in it that just work really well together, and it's a great example of a deck being more than just the sum of its parts. They come together really well. Like I had a game where sorry, I should say the houses in this deck, because that'll be relevant. The houses in this deck are Untamed, Sanctum, and Shadows. And I've had games where I've had two Bulwarks on the table. Bulwark is a Sanctum card. It's a creature, 4 power, 2 armor, and each of Bulwark's neighbors gets +2 armor. So I've had two Bulwarks, and then in between those two Bulwarks, a Witch of the Eye, which is an untamed creature, 3 power, and when you reap it, return a card from your discard pile to your hand. So a bulwark on either side of the witch. So that meant the witch had 4 armor alongside its 3 power. And then to kind of coup de grace the whole thing, I had. It gets worse. Well, and all of this happened in a game. So this is not Magic Christmas Land, or at least maybe it is, but I got it. I pulled it off once. So I had the two bulwarks. I had the witch in the middle, and then I was able to put Mantle of the Zealot on the witch. Mantle of the Zealot is an upgrade, Sanctum upgrade, which reads, this creature gains. You may use this creature as if it belonged to the active house. So house cheating. So I got that on the witch. So that meant that not only did the witch have 4 armor and 3 power, so effectively you needed to hit it for 7 in one shot to take it out, but every single one of my turns, I was able to pull something out of my discard pile, which was miasma in this particular game. And I was able to just declare Shadow as my house every turn, use the witch to return miasma, and lock my opponent out of the game for several turns while I forged my third key. It was very rude. My opponent was my wife, and I definitely slept on the couch that night.
I was actually going to say, like, yeah,
It
that
was
feels bad. Like,
I felt bad.
knowing I can't do anything with with that discard pile, like getting rid of you tinkering in your discard pile is just
Yeah, I felt
not
bad
fun.
doing it. Not bad enough to not do it, but I felt bad doing it.
Yeah, I that's pretty rude. That I actually had to go look and see if Mantle of the Zealot worked that way, and yeah, it does not say Sanctum specifically. It just says as long as it belongs to the active house, or use as if it belongs to the active house. That's pretty rude. Uh, yeah, fair. And this deck has some really really neat things that I appreciate. Like Mighty Tiger seems so unassuming of a thing, but it's like it's a 4 creature. A 4 power creature comes into play, deal 4 damage to enemy creature. Again, I have such problems with elusive. Being able to do something where I can just pop that thing on the table and kill a problem, or at least a 4 power or lower problem. I do like that a lot. I mean, again, very unassuming card.
Right. And it has two Apes in it. Apes a untamed creature, 3 power. While Ape is attacking, ignore taunt and elusive. So it's a surgical fight removal type of thing. Steve mentioned Mighty Tiger. That's an untamed creature with 4 power. When you play it, deal 4 to an enemy creature. So that's important because it bypasses elusive. The deck just, like I said, it's just mediocre cards. They're decent. They're good enough, but there's nothing amazing in it. And there's a good amount of removal in this deck too. The Shadow has a lot of removal in it. There's one or two little board wipes. The Sanctum has a good presence, but there's nothing. I don't know. And maybe this could be my naivete with the game, my inexperience speaking, but there's nothing in this deck that's like, oh man, that's a flashy, powerful, strong card that's gonna like blow the doors off of the game if people see that I have this deck. But it puts in work. Since I started keeping track, which I think I think it's 3-0 since I started keeping track. And I think before that, it only lost one game out of probably a total of 6 or 7 games, maybe
Yeah.
two losses. But it works. It just does what it does, and it can get through a lot of hate. Um, but it's fun. It only has one of my preferred houses in it, which is Shadow. In other games, I like the grindy, long control games, and Shadow lends itself to that. It also has a lot of self-sacrificing stuff for value. Um, One of my favorite combos is Bad Penny, who's a shadow creature with 1 power. When she gets destroyed, you return her to your hand. Um, and then Pawn Sacrifice, which is a shadow action. You get an Ember for playing it, and when you play it, sacrifice a friendly creature. If you do, deal 3 damage each to 2 creatures. So you play the Bad Penny, then you play Pawn Sacrifice, sacrificing the Bad Penny since she goes to the discard pile, effectively since she's destroyed. She comes back to your hand instead, and you still get the benefit of playing Pawn Sacrifice. You then can replay Penny because you've already chosen Shadows as your house, and you just basically got a free Pawn Sacrifice. All the upside of Pawn Sacrifice with none of the effective downside. And there's a lot of cards that work similarly, that kind of come together like that. Miasma is a card I mentioned earlier. When I was talking about that lockout, it's a Shadows action, generates 1 amber. When you play it, your opponent skips their Forge of Key step on the next turn, which is really mean. They get a whole bunch of Ember, they're excited, they're going to win the game, and you play Miasma to shut them down, at least for a turn, while you dig for another answer.
Miasma is so rude.
It
I
is.
honestly like Miasma. Bad Penny. I've said this several times. If I ever get a Maverick in the deck, which Mavericks are cards that are printed out of house.
Mhm.
So you have a chance of getting a card that would be printed in a completely like so you can get a Bad Penny printed in, Mars or something like that. So my thought is that if I ever get a Maverick card, I want a. I don't even care what house it is, or maybe Logos. I might not be so excited about a Bad Penny in Logos, but any of the other houses, if I could get a Bad Penny in any of those other houses, I would be smitten with that deck. It could be garbage, and I'd be like, great. I'm gonna find some dirty thing that I can do with Bad Penny because there are so many things that you can do with a creature that you play on the tape, like play on the battlefield, blow it up, and play it back on there again. It's so strong of a card. Like, and it's so unassuming too. Like the first time I saw it, I was like, "This card's garbage."
Yeah.
But now I'm like, "No, I must have Bad Penny forever."
It's a really sweet card. I don't
It's
like you knocking on Logos like that because Logos is my other favorite house. A lot of people, a lot of people like Shadows. A lot of people feel like Logos. I'm not, unique in my tastes here. I don't. I don't. It's not the power of Logos that appeals to me. It's just drawing cards. Like I'd be happy if I had a deck that could just fly through itself, never win a game, but I could draw the whole thing every game. uh, to that effect, I like random kind of like come from behind, come out of nowhere moments where you've pretty much lost the game and you've got almost no chance, and then you just play one card and that lets you play another card, and you kind of daisy chain the sequence of playing multiple cards, and then all of a sudden you're one step away from winning and your opponent is scrambling to deal with what you were able to just do. To that end, Wild Wormhole, hands down, is hands down my favorite card in the
Ugh,
entire game right now.
ugh.
It's just so I just like that ridiculous random, like, all right, well, it's if I don't stop you right now, you're going to forge your third key on the next turn, and so I guess I'll just wild wormhole. And sure enough, in one of the games against Steve, I was able to wild wormhole a miasma and shut down his key forging. Did
That
did
that oh
It
god,
was
that was so bad.
hilarious. Did I end up winning that? I
So
don't remember now. Did I end up winning that game?
I think you did. I think you did. That was when we played last at Midgard,
Right,
right?
right,
Like,
right.
yeah. That. Oh God. That I was so mad.
So I should just Wild Wormhole is a Logos action. Generates an Ember when you play it, and when you play it, play the top card of your deck. So you cheat your, well, maybe not cheat, because if there's costs associated, if there's conditions associated with playing whatever card you reveal, you have to honor those before you can play it. But it kind of replaces itself with whatever's on top of your deck anyway, and it gives you an Ember. So I was able to use Wild Wormhole. The top card of my deck was a Miasma. Shut Steve down, gave me an extra turn to come back and ultimately win that game. So it's just that kind of randomness is something I appreciate. I also, and I know I'm not alone in liking library access, but that is one of my other absolutely favorite cards. I need a second. There it is. Library access is a Logos action. When you play it, for the remainder of the turn, each time you play another card, draw a card. So you play your library access, you play your Wild Wormhole, you draw a card, then you play the card off the top with Wild Wormhole. Since that card itself gets played, you draw another card. And so you can, like I mentioned, daisy chaining, you can just start drawing tons of cards and playing them and get yourself out of a bad spot, or put yourself so far ahead that your opponent has no chance to kind of come back at you. I just like drawing cards. So, regardless of the outcome of drawing all of these cards, I'm just happy to have 10 cards in my hand, even if they're doing nothing. So, that's
Yeah.
definitely.
That.
Go ahead.
Good.
No. So,
Oh,
that's.
so that actually brings up like are some really good points about Wild Wormhole specifically. Is that there the requirements are can that is one thing about Wild Wormhole that can totally like put you in a bad situation because you don't end up getting any benefit out of it. So the ruling for that, because there's actually some questions about this, because there is a card in Brobnar called the I think it's Kelfie Dragon, and it's a Khalifi Dragon. Sorry, Khalifi Dragon is a 12 power creature that cannot be played unless you have 7 or more Amber. And then it has a fight reap ability, which is gain 1 and then deal 5 damage to a creature. So it is a bomb when it hits the table. But this is where the interesting thing happens is you can't play this card with Wild Wormhole if you don't have 7 Amber. So what happens if you do that is you play the Wild Wormhole, you look at the card. If the card does not fulfill the requirements, you put it back on the top of the deck. So that's kind of rough. I mean, it gives you kind of a neat tutor or scry effect, but at the same time, it that can probably feel bad. And then you kind of let on to something that you might have at the top of your deck that you know someone's going to be able to prepare for. Um, but that's got to feel real good when you play the Wild Wormhole for that 7th Amber and then flip the Khaleesi Dragon, and you're like that's got to feel really good.
Yeah. I mean, now Wild Wormhole does also have its downside, where you could play the Wild Wormhole, and the card you flip over deals 3 damage or 2 damage to every creature in play, and your opponent happens to have no creatures in play. So you're just hurting yourself at that point, which has
Yeah.
also happened. So yeah, it's and I like that risk reward of the Wild Wormhole versus so it's why I like Logos as much as I do.
Yeah.
So we've talked a little bit about what we do like. So what are some of the houses that you are less a fan of, Steve?
And it's in my favorite deck, but Mars is uh, I it so it was a funny thing that I realized today actually, because I was talking about it with somebody. Is Shadows is an entire faction that does not care about the existence of shadows. Like not a single card cares if you have a shadows creature in play. At least that I've seen. So if you guys have something that I'm just missing, please let us know. But from what I can tell, Shadows doesn't care about shadows. Mars cares way too much about Mars for me to feel comfortable with it. And it certainly does bring some interesting things to the table. But for me, it just feels like so often I either play a Mars creature I play is so low power that it's so inconsequential that I even put it on the table. And it just gets blown up by some Brobnar brute, or I have this great card in hand, and I guess my best story for Mars and why it is my least favorite house is and this is 100% my own interpretation, and it was very very stupid, but in turn very very funny when it happened. Was I played a mating season, and so mating season is it's an action you play. It is an action you gain an amber, and then it has play. Shuffle each Mars creature into its owner's deck. Each player gains one amber for each creature shuffled into their deck this way, which I read that as you gain one amber for each creature shuffled into their deck this way. So I had three, he had five, and I was like, I'm going to get eight amber, and look at this chump. And I played the card, and I was like, why does he have 12 amber all of a sudden? And I looked and I'm like, why do I only have three amber? And realized that I just handed my opponent two keys, which again was totally my fault because I misread that card so hard. Uh, but it was just like one of those things. It's like, oh, it cares about all Mars creatures. And it makes for interesting gameplay. Obviously, that was a very interesting misplay that I found funny. But it's just I feel like the house needs so much support from itself, and then on top of that, it needs support from other houses. To me, I'm probably still just playing them wrong, but that's fine. I again, it's a house I want to learn more, just because like it is my least favorite house. And I play this deck a lot, so I'm more comfortable with them now. But it's just every time I play a creature, I'm just like, I wish I could have picked any other house. But having said that, I still have some positives about Mars. In particularly a couple of cards. Tunk being one of them. Tunk is a creature. He's 6 power with 1 armor. After you play another Mars creature, fully heal Tunk. So if you can do things that allow you to exhaust and ready Tunk in the same turn and just keep putting down Mars creatures, Tunk alone can wipe a good portion of a board by itself, which is bananas. Like it's so much fun to do, especially if you can pull it off just the right way. If you can figure out a way to ready exhaust and ready him, and then keep playing Mars creatures, it's just so much fun to watch that chain reaction happen. And it's a lot of the reason why I love this game too, is you just get to watch those chain
Yeah,
reactions.
definitely. Yeah, Tunk definitely puts in a lot of work, and Mars seems like a house that the weird thing about Mars, you almost have to choose it as your house twice in a row. Like if you put a couple Mars cards down, then you're going to want to use them the following turn. Because otherwise, what I've found with Mars is that if you don't use them again the following turn, people will just chip away and take them out because they're really threatening. If you can ready them and then use them again, they have crazy effects when they fight Reap. And you just don't want to let that happen. So it's hard to keep them around. But if you do, if someone lets you keep them around, you're really incentivized to use Mars a second time. And that kind of feels
Yeah.
bad if you don't draw any new Mars cards. So I think Mars as a house is really good in a deck where it has a lot of cards, where it is the primary, so to speak, where it is the primary, so to speak, house of the deck.
Yeah, I think I mean, there is a certain situation where you pretty much kind of always want to try to strive for the same house 2 turns. So I definitely do agree with you on that. The thing the thing that you end up running into is with Mars, I just don't. I find that sometimes the creatures when they hit the table, I don't get the like they'll hit and like the big bruisers like Tunk and y- or the big bruisers like Tunk hit the table, and then I end up losing all of the little guys that I wanted to support Tunk. I end up losing them before I even get the chance to like play them. And there are some cards that help allow me to play those creatures. But it's still just one of those things where I just seem to have a hard time keeping Mars creatures on the table that are less than 3 power
Well, a lot of
because,
them
like,
are 3 or less power.
yeah, right, right. So with having said that, let's talk about I guess you could say, the most feels bad card in this game, and not in the fun way. And I really only mentioned that it's interesting because of the kind of controversy that surrounds the card, and that card is Biomatrix Backup. And before I actually explain the card, I kind of want to explain how a lot of destroyed effects work. Uh, and this is straight from Richard Garfield himself. Destroyed effects were intended to be effects that when the trigger happened, they would completely resolve. You would have situations where it's like just destroyed when this thing's destroyed, do X. So where Biomatrix Backup's controversy comes into play is it is a upgrade. So it's a card that you put on a creature. It gives you an ember for playing it, and then it says this creature gains destroyed. You may put this creature into its owner's archives. So the problem here is the clause of may and how turns work in Keyforge. It is implied based on the rules, or actually, it's just stated in the rules that the active player makes all decisions for cards during their turn. That's where the may clause becomes a problem. So if I destroy Ryan's Mars creature that has Biomatrix Backup on it, I get to choose where this creature goes when it dies.
Right.
Uh, which is not it. That seems wrong. It seems very wrong. Richard Garfield said that this was definitely a mistake. It was not supposed to say you may. It was supposed to just be put this creature into its owner's archives. But it's kind of become what it makes for an interesting social interaction when you're playing like at your local game store, where the question becomes, how do you play Biomatrix Backup? You know, do we want to play this as I do get control over it, or are we playing this as this is what the card says and this is what it does, and sorry, because the official ruling is this. I tend to just play it as the official ruling and try to work it in my favor, and I don't think a lot of people think it's a dead card. I don't. I do think there are some interesting things that you can do, especially with play effect creatures, where you can play it on something that will have an effect when it comes into play, blow up everything, and then that card goes to your archives. You pull it up the next turn, and then you play it again. You get that benefit, and it
Yeah,
gives
it's
you an
really
amber.
not bad.
I mean, it is bad,
Well,
but trying to look at it like trying to make the best of it, it's not a card that I'm happy to play, but for one amber, it's
I mean,
definitely
if
helpful.
if you could play it the way it was intended, this was more what I was.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. If you could play it for the way it was intended,
Which
it's really
I
good.
think that eventually there'll be errata. Which is it's a little early for them to publish errata yet, but I imagine that at some point, once they kind of get all of their results in, so to speak, they will publish errata that effectively makes that work the way that it was supposed to.
Right. So yes, and this is mostly an experience thing, but Logos is my other house that I just is my least favorite. The couple of times that I've played with them, I it's either I just haven't gotten the cards that make me do the cool things that Logos tends to pull off, but it really comes down to I only own one deck, and it is a Logos Sanctum's Shadows deck. And it actually does okay. I finally won with it once, but it had gone on a four game losing streak the moment I opened it.
Jeez.
but it's a fine deck. It's just I think I just haven't figured out how to pilot it
I
yet.
mean,
But the cards that I find interesting in Logos, which are different than yours, and they are actually cards that I actually enjoy playing, unlike Biomatrix Backup. But Replicator is a 2 power creature that has a reap trigger effect that is trigger the reap effect of another creature in play as if you controlled that creature. That creature does not exhaust. Which annoyingly, I've always played this trying to reap my neighbor's reap abilities, not thinking that I could reap anything. So I've put the replicator in precarious situations in hopes of using that ability. So that's something I need to do better at. But I think it's a cool card. Like I think it does. It's a
it's a
neat little
very
thing.
cool. I mean, that gives you a lot of cross house play. I can't think of any specific examples. Oh, I guess.
I
Well, I was
actually
gonna say
oh
which
good.
of the which one is it? Which of the eye? So you can use you can declare logos. Oh man, so you could declare logos as your house, play library access, then reap with replicator to use which of the eyes ability to return library access back to your hand to play library access again, and now you're going to be drawing 2 cards off of every card you play. That
Yep. The other
seems
thing I
good.
thought of too is Do
Oh
Fairy.
wow, yeah, yeah. There we go.
Is yeah is you can reap with Do Fairy. I mean this would require house cheating, but you could reap with Do Fairy and then reap with the replicator and choose Dew Fairy as your reap target, and now you've gotten
Yep,
4 amber. That turn. The other thing you could do, I mean, it also is another situation of like if there's a reap ability that you have on the table that you really like, you have it. You now have it as an
yep.
option in two
And if you get
houses
multiple
with no
if you get
problems.
multiple replicators, you can use the same creature's reap ability. So if you get 2 replicators and a dew fairy, you now have 2 additional dew fairies. Likewise, if
Yep.
you can use so let's say you declare logos as your house, you have a creature with a really good reap ability, and then you have the replicator. You can use the replicator to copy that first creature's reap ability and then also reap that creature, so you effectively get 2 out of the same activation.
Yep. Yeah.
It's a really
It's
strong
it's
card.
a really interesting. Yeah. I the problem is I think it suffers from the same thing that Dew Fairy suffers from in that it's so low power that people see it, and if you can't protect
It's a
it, it
threat.
just
It's a
goes
big
away.
threat.
Uh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you can house cheat, it's perfect. But because you can, or you can, if you can use it the same turn you played it, uh,
Right.
that's really good. But if
Yeah, if you have
otherwise,
some way of having it
just
come in
kind of,
ready.
yep. But if it gets blown up almost every
Yeah.
time I've
So
played it,
you could use a
so
replicator to copy a different replicator to copy something else. No reason
that
to
is
do that
true.
other than style points, but you can.
Well, you get an amber. Oh, no, you only get an amber for the original. You only get an amber for the original replicator
Right.
play. You don't get amber for reap the
No.
other thing's reap
There's no
ability.
point to
You're
doing
effectively copying it. Yeah, you're
that. Right.
copying
So
it
if you
from the
have
other
creatures
creature.
A, B, and C, B and C both being replicators, you take replicator C and copy A, replicator B and copy A. That's the same thing as saying replicator C copies replicator B to copy to copy creature A. It's because it's totally the same thing. It's just style points, which
Right.
that's not nothing.
Yep. Yeah, that's fair.
there, there note that there is no actual thing called style points. That's outside the game.
There
Maybe
might
maybe
be
they will have
later.
style points. You do something awesome, you get extra ember.
Yeah. Yeah. There you go. So my other card that I think is super cool is Transposition Sandals. Transposition Sandals, and it is an upgrade. You gain amber for playing it, and this creature gains action. Swap this creature with another friendly creature in the battle line. You may use that other creature this turn. So what I've found is fun with Transposition Sandals is putting it on a creature like uh Titan mechanic, which is I think is a 5 power creature from in Logos, where it reduces all key costs by 1 as long as it is on a flank. Uh, so what you do is you put transposition sandals on the Titan mechanic, then use the Titan mechanic to switch it to a different spot when it is not your
Right. So it's
turn,
on the flank,
or when you're yeah. So
but
it's not on the flank when
right.
it's
So
your
it
opponent's
starts
turn, and if
at the
you're about
start
to
of your turn. It's on your flank. You get the credit for it. Then during that
right,
same turn, you use it to swap with something else, so it's no longer on the flank, and that way only you gain the benefit. That's awesome.
right, yeah. So it's a neat little thing. There's a couple of other cards that you can do it with. There's a knight. I forget. It's not raiding knight.
Do you
Oh,
want me to read it? I
staunch
have it
knight.
here.
Oh yeah, go for
Staunch
it.
Knight is the one you're thinking of. Staunch Knight's a sanctum
Yep.
creature, 4 power, 2 armor. Staunch Knight gets +2 power while it is on a flank. That works great with those boots because I imagine where you're going, or the sandals rather. I imagine where you're going is you put them on the knight, and that way, no matter where you play your creatures, he can just swap to the flank at all times.
So there's another little interesting play that you can do with this as well, specifically with Staunch Knight, or really anything that wants to hang out on the flank. Is in Brobnar there is a creature called Valder. She is 6 power and she gains +2 power when attacking a creature on a flank. So if you want to keep something alive that's on a flank, you can put the transposition sandals on that to keep her from getting the damage buff. Keep her from getting that damage buff when trying to kill
Okay.
that creature. Alternately, you can reposition things on the battlefield to gain benefits from other things like Shadow Selves, which is a 9 power
Oh yeah.
creature that does no damage, but accepts all damage to its neighbors are redirected to it. So you can flip creatures around to uh, put them next to Shadow Self so you can make sure that they don't die. Or if you have something that you just played this turn and you want it to be next to the Shadow Self, whatever has the boots that is currently next to Shadow Self, you can just swap their places. So being able to manipulate the battle line like that ends up being really, really interesting. It's one of my favorite
That's
Logos
pretty cool.
cards.
Like that.
So we share a common
We do.
least favorite house. So I don't know if we need to rehash that
No, I
argument.
spoke my piece a little bit. I'm not a fan of Mars. I mean, for this mostly the same reasons you are. It's a very parasitic house. Doesn't really care about any other houses. It works best with itself. It kind of makes you want to almost play like a mono Mars deck. Obviously not possible, but if it were, Mars would love that. And it's very creature dependent. It does have some artifacts, but those artifacts require you to have Mars cards in your hand or to have Mars cards on the table. It's just a very, very like you want Mars and nothing else in your deck, and I don't know. It's just very clunky and awkward. Now, I a lot of this may be because I have one or two Mars decks. I haven't played a lot of them. Some of that is because I just haven't had a lot of fun playing them the one or two times I have. Maybe if I played them more and got used to playing Mars, got better with playing Mars, I would enjoy Mars more as a house. Maybe if I had better Mars cards, I would enjoy playing Mars more. So I'm not going to say it's actually why I'm not going to say anything is actually a bad house, but it's just not something I've found myself leaning towards. If I open a deck and it's got Mars, it's makes me shed a single tear. And I don't really have any cards of particular interest. So I'm not really interested in Mars. There are some cool cards though. I
Yeah,
got
I think
one
that's
of the
fair.
recent decks I got had Ammonia Cloud, which is a Mars action that just deals 3 to all creatures, which is pretty cool because it's a board wipe. I mean, nothing super fancy about that, but it's neat. Board wipes are cool. Uh, Beyond
It's a fun like turn 2
right, you can
replay.
kind of sandbag, and then blow everything up, and then drop the
Yeah.
rest of your Mars house. You can sculpt your hand over several turns, play all of your non-Mars stuff, and so your entire hand is pretty much Mars, and then just drop it all and dominate the following turn. Um, Beyond
Yep.
Mars, my other least favorite faction is Sanctum. Um, not that it isn't good. It's very good, and it's actually the my two favorite decks: Richard the Scaled and Cornelius and Monkios the Mighty. Both actually have Sanctum in them, and they are crucial to winning games in both of those decks. There's just a lot of support in both of the in the house as a whole. There's a lot of really useful stuff, a lot of removal, a lot of healing, a lot of defense, a lot of control, a lot of ember generation. I just really don't like paladins. I really hate the whole holy knight aesthetic. And so it irks me that they are effective and work well with my personal play style. And it just, every time I see one of those knights, I cringe and grit my teeth a little bit because I'm just not a fan. So,
I think that the approach to them is like the approach to their look is really really cool. Like it really gives off the future
yeah,
night feeling.
it's weird to say, even though I don't like the aesthetic of them, it's a good aesthetic. Like they nail what they're going for. They're going for like future Holy Knight space paladin kind of thing. And they do a great job with it. Like the cards are evocative. They look like the art in them, like Bulwark, for example, we talked about him earlier. He's the one that grants armor to his comrades or his neighbors. It's a guy with like a big old shield, wearing like a space plate, and it evokes exactly what you expect. Oh yeah, he's protecting someone. There's people in the art behind him. He's doing that. I just not a fan of Space Knights, but they do a great job with it. Not taking anything away with it. It's just not my personal
They
preference.
do. They do such a good job.
And so it irks me that it's in my two favorite decks, and that I as the cards, like if someone whited out the art on those cards, I would have no problem with those cards. But like playing it, it also looks like an exclamation point. Their house logo. It's the
It
order of the
does.
exclamation point.
It does. It yeah. I yeah. I got nothing. It does. I can't argue.
Although I could also
Um.
see it being the cat eye. It's the order of the cat eyes.
Oh, oh yeah. Seems vaguely
Yeah, a
Egyptian
little
in a
bit.
way.
But they're cool. Nothing against Sanctum. They're more of a throwaway answer to least favorite house, because they're a great, functionally, mechanically, they're a fantastic house. They have a lot of synergy, especially with houses like Shadows, that tend to maybe have weaker creatures and need a little bit of help to shore up those lower power creatures that have effective abilities. Sanctum really helps provide that between taunt and healing, and cards like Bulwark, or putting really nasty threats down on the table that need to be dealt with, and instead of the Shadows threats, or by using the Sanctum creature to remove an opposing threat before it can remove your threat. There's a lot of really good utility in Sanctum, and I don't think I will ever be unhappy to see Sanctum as one of the houses in a deck. I think that probably my favorite combination is Sanctum, Logos, and it's kind of a toss up between Untamed and Shadows. I like the style of Shadows, but Untamed has some really powerful stuff in it. So it's tricky either way.
Yeah. There. It's funny to me because you look at if we were talking about cheating specifically, they have some of the best house
Oh yeah.
cheating, but literally the worst key cheat in the entire game. And it's not. I hate to say it's not the worst. It's just so hard. No, it's the worst. Key abduction is probably the second worst, which we'll talk about key abduction another day. But so their one key cheating card is called Epic Quest. It is an artifact that when you play it, you archive each friendly knight creature in play. So you're bouncing you're not even bouncing the knights to your hand, you're bouncing the knights to your archive. And then it has Omni. If you played 7 or more Sanctum cards this turn, sacrifice Epic Quest and forge a key
Whoa,
at
are
no
you?
cost.
No, I haven't seen this card before. That card is amazing. Are you kidding me?
It's so
It's
hard to play.
so
It
it's I understand it's verging into Magic Christmas Land territory of, like you need to have the kind of perfect situation for it to work. But like that's like I've had three or four. Well, to be fair, they're Sanctum cards. I'm assuming they were knights. But let's probably actually, yeah, no, I've had three or four knights in play at one given time. So archive those, and then just need to get a couple more knights into play on a later turn. Um, and that's, I mean, that's doable. That's not even, I'd say maybe moderate difficulty, but that's, and it's a free key. You pay no ember. So, I mean, that's,
Yeah, I mean, you can certainly pull a two key
yeah.
turn. Like you can forge a key and then threaten a key. Uh, but to be honest, again, I don't have a car. I don't have a deck with
Well, it's
Epic Quest in
also
it. I wish I did just to try.
one thing to consider
But
is that it's, as we mentioned a little bit earlier in the episode, it's tough to remove artifacts. Even if you bounce this, that's not. I mean, it's annoying, but it's not the end of the world because I mean, heck, that might even actually help you. Like you play this, archive a bunch of knights, um, and then maybe you get a couple more down, like a slow trickle, so that you can't actually use it yet. And then someone bounces it to your hand, you can play it again and archive those knights. And then on a following turn, you get all those knights back. All those knights are sanctum, and blap, you just shoot them all out, and then get a free key. Like this is a very strong card, especially like I said, considering that there's limited ways to destroy or interact with opponents' artifacts. I would be very annoyed and frustrated to see this across the table.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's certainly interesting. I mean, it's certainly no key abduction. That card is certainly not. I'm not a fan of that card
No.
either. But so yeah, so I think that kind of does it for us. I mean, we're going to go play. We're going to go play in our first
Yep.
tournament tomorrow. That should be interesting. We've not played a competitive game yet. We've certainly played a ton of Crucible, and we've played a ton of games in person with our kind of very large friend group that somehow got obsessed with this game as well.
That's a good game.
But yeah, it should be
Yeah.
it should be good. So, but yeah, so I think we will have a probably more about that next
Sure.
week.
Yeah.
So yeah, so our release schedule is probably going to be a weekly thing. To kind of go over like what we're looking to accomplish here is we're definitely going for the kind of competitive amateur. We definitely are going to like do tournaments and stuff like that, and talk about organized play a lot, probably more than straight up casual play. Uh, but yeah, I think you should expect an episode from us next week as well.
I believe the release schedule we're looking at is Fridays.
Yes. So Fridays will be the day we'll publish, and then we go to recording on Saturdays.
Yeah. Hey, it gives you plenty of time to edit, man.
So yeah, so I think that's it for us. Everybody have a great night. Thank you for listening. Or well, I don't know what time it is where you are, but or when you're listening to this. But have a good one, and thanks for listening.